Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. I think my mic's like crazy loud. We have bellied up. It is, what is today? The June 12th. It is finally a beautiful day in upstate New York since we've had rain and cold. Only in upstate New York, folks, can it be mid-June, and our high this week so far has been like 72 degrees. It has absolutely been ridiculous. But our guest doesn't care about that because if I'm remembering right, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, he's in beautiful Hawaii, or at least invest there, and he's going to explain to us how to invest. And he's got, I mean, I'm just looking over his list of things. Over $2 billion in real estate owned, 10,000 plus rental properties, two-time best-selling author. I can't finish my first book, let alone be a best-selling author. So joining us today, we're going to be talking about some real estate, and we might get into some 401k talk. I definitely want to have that conversation if we have the time. Joining us is Mr. Lane, and he's going to correct me in a minute because I'm going to do my best. Kawaoka.
Hey, nice for having me, Sean. Aloha, everybody. How's it
How
going?
well did I do? Did I get it?
You got it. Close enough.
Good
Wealth
enough for government work?
elevator
Good enough for government
podcast
work?
is the important part. Yeah.
So let me run and look, folks, if you're wondering what Lane's got going on, you can always check out. He's got his own podcast, the Wealth Elevator Podcast. It's on the wealthelevator.com/podcast. He's got all that going on. And I'm telling you, man, it's a pretty good headshot you got on your website. Also, I'm a little jealous. I should get my better headshot onto mine because yours is pretty GQ. I'm gonna have to tell you.
Hey, that's how real estate is, right? We all look a little like two rating higher, nicer looking, and 10 years younger, right? Or depends if you. I want
When
to
did
go
you
the other
take
way,
this?
I guess.
Like, does everybody do the so when did you take this picture? Well, that's my picture from 1985.
Yeah.
Sir, you're 72 years old.
That's like kind of it's kind of a funny joke that me and my spouse have. It's like, on the weekends when, all those supposed real estate agents, I'm not a real estate agent, so I can make fun of them, I guess. But like all of them like looked so different than like their little billboards. So like it's always funny when you see them go retrieving their billboards for their open houses. It's like, hey, stop, put down that sign, man.
It's
Oh,
somebody
shoot, that's
else's.
you. Oh man, so my bad. My bad.
It's somebody stealing somebody's stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, let's get into a little bit of house cleaning before we get into the show here. As always, folks, we got the big board over my right shoulder for sticker and a cause. I let my kid touch my computer and he has like adjusted my stuff. All right. So over my right shoulder is the big board for sticker and a cause. So if you got something you're supporting, something you believe in, something you think is important, and you've got a sticker for it, you can reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, the Above the Bar Podcast.com. Reach out to us. Let us know what it is. I'll tell you where to send your sticker to, and we'll read about you live on the air. So make sure you're doing that. I'm trying to now, Lane, I forgot to mention to you, if you see me looking to my left at any point in time, that's where my second screen is. I promise you I'm paying attention. Just everything's over there. But paying attention and looking around. Lane doesn't have any in his bar background right now, but we got to talk about our sponsors, and that's Budget Blinds of East Greenbush and Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, New York. Budget Blinds is your number one international, because they have offices in Canada, window treatment company focused on everything from blinds, shades, drapery. They come out to your home. It's a free consultation. They measure, they install, they do it all for you, regardless of the size. They have something that can take care of it, whether it be motorized. And if you're in the capital region and you reach out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush or Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, New York, they are currently running a sale, 20% off your entire order. And if you motorize it, they're going to add another 5%. So make sure you let them know you're there to belly up to the bar, and they're going to take good care of you. And real quick, if you're finding me through Lane or Lane through me, make sure you're liking, sharing, following us. That's a hugely important thing. That's how all of our messages get out. But let's get into it. So, Lane, let me make sure I got this right. And I kind of was talking about your bio a little bit here, but you own over 10,000 rental units. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's
Oh,
vanity metrics, right? But I mean, I think what we want to kind of focus on and is like, the goal here is to kind of help everybody get started, right, on that
well,
path to financial freedom and picking up that first rental property, right, or that big first deal.
well, that's exactly where I wanted to go with this. I mean, you look like you're 25. I'm going to be real honest with you. Like to have that many, you don't look like you're old enough to have that many. How long have you been in this?
I'm like almost 40, but I've been doing this stuff since I was right after I graduated. So you want to kind of me to get into it.
Yeah.
2007, I graduated college to be an engineer.
Okay.
Up until that point, I kind of followed what I call this linear path, where taught us, study hard, go to school. For some reason, I must have been good at math and science. Maybe because I was Asian. I don't know. Some Asians suck at math, but like, look, I just didn't want to go to more college, right? So
You were
like,
done with it.
yeah, even in high school, I was like Googling. This is when Google was not a lot of people knew about Google back then. I was like, well, what is the most amount I can get paid with the least amount of college education or grad school? And it's like all these engineering degrees, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do that. And graduated 2007, started to work for the man, and I hated it. If anybody knows what it's like to be an engineer, it's just a bunch of pushing paper and it sucks. And you don't get paid too much, but I got paid like almost six figures starting out, and I was able to save 30, 40 grand. I started off like with a lot of good financial skills, right? Like growing up, we weren't wealthy, we weren't poor, like,
You're
but we were
comfortable.
taught to, yeah, yeah. Man, my parents went to college, that's what they taught me to do. That's kind of the brainwashing that I think a lot of people are gone through. But I saved up like 80 grand to buy my first home to live in Seattle, Washington pretty quickly, a couple years it took me. And you know, started to live there, and I was only home on the weekends because I was working in construction management
Okay.
and traveling all over for the railroad, all over the Pacific Northwest and Texas
Which
and all
railroad were you
over.
working for?
The one that stands for "Better Not Start a Family." I'll leave it at that. Uh,
BNSF. Well, I worked for CSX when I first retired out of the Marine Corps, and then, they wanted me to be in Willard, Ohio. Do you know where that is?
kinda. CSX and NS are on the east side, right?
Yep, and
So,
then and my family was like, "We're not moving there," so I ended up, working for Amtrak for another 7 years till COVID hit. But I was a train
cool,
master. I was a train master at first and then became a conductor.
cool, cool. Well, you know what it's all about, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Transportation
When you say that, I
companies,
know. Yep.
like, it's all about. You get paid pretty well,
Yeah, the
right?
money's good.
The money is good. So this is me in my early 20s, and I was like, well, let me just rent this property out because I was a roadmaster back then, and I would manage all the crews to construct the track, and I would only be home on Saturday, right? Because it's 100% travel. And then, it's so messed up about this job is that they expect you to travel out to the job site on Sunday, and you're lucky to get back home on Friday evening.
Yep.
Whatever. Um, but you know what? Like looking back, like when things suck so badly like that, it really pushes you to do something outside what you normally do. And that's what I did, right? Like I was like, this sucks. I'm gonna rent this thing out. And then but that was kind of where I got this taste of cash flow. And I was like, whoa, if I just did this a few more times, I'm making money like four ways: mortgage, the tenant's paying down my mortgage. And that's the difference between when you're the homeowner and you're renting it out to tenants. The tenants are with their heart, sweat, and tears paying down your mortgage, and you're getting the equity built up. The tax benefits, we can get more into that later on, the cash flow and then the appreciation. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm making like 30% on my money a year, and it's pretty easy, and people don't believe me. Like it's all numbers. Just on my website, thewealthelevator.com/returns. I do this little whiteboard exercise where I go through this, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? Why the hell am I investing in this 401k stuff at Vanguard or wherever, right? And then I mean, I just saved up more money, bought more rental properties, and then in 2015, been doing this for like 6, 7 years. Had 11 rental properties. So like it. I think what a lot of people don't realize is like it's like watching grass grow in the beginning, but you hit a hockey stick at some point.
Now, so you kind of went into it a kind of a unique way. We've had some other folks on that were more about like, hey, I had some money, I stumbled into a rental property, I bought it, and I did it again and again. You actually were living in your place and then decided to rent it out, correct?
Yeah, and that was kind of where I got proof of concept, right? But just before we get moving, like I don't know anything about house flipping or wholesaling, right? Like a lot of what we do is we help, accredited investors, guys who make, 100 grand, 150 grand plus a year, or already have $1 million net worth, take it from what I call in my book the first floor to the second floor wealth elevator. A lot of people out there, they might follow Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, a lot of these tactics that are geared towards people who don't have very much money, right? Or need to get a freaking job, right? But I mean, I had a good job. I had pretty good, saving skills. So when I first started, I didn't have $1 million net worth. I had nothing, but I just plugged away, bought some rental properties. And then in 2015, I felt that was kind of when I transitioned from the first floor to the second floor as they started to interact with a lot of other accredited investors, started to realize that, you know, wealthy people, they don't own rental properties after a certain point. It's a pain in the ass. Like
What do you mean?
when I had yeah, so like when I had 11 rental properties, just to have, people know what it's like. I mean, you're not managing this stuff yourself. That's grandpa stuff, right? Where grandpa only has one or two rental properties. You want to hire property management, right? I mean, you got to pay them 10% of the rents, and they like take half of the full first month's rents when they lease it up. But they kind of do your dirty work for you, right? They interact with the tenants, and they provide a very critical layer of like liability, right, between you and the tenants too. And it's critical if you want to buy more than a handful of these rental properties, right? But with 11 rental properties, I had maybe an eviction or two every 6 months, and some kind of big catastrophe that would happen every few months. And it's not bad with 11 rentals, but with 11 rentals, like nearly cash flowing maybe $300 after expenses, insurance, taxes, things that break, tenant skips town. It's not much, right? So, 11 rentals is not nearly as much as what you think. You probably need more like 30 or 40 of these rental properties. But if you're gonna 4x that number, you get a 4x that exception rate, right? So now you're talking about eviction every couple months, shoot,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And some kind of big stupid thing that happens every couple of weeks. Yeah.
And that's, and that, I guess from what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding you right, that's eating your time to look for the next rental property. If you're managing 11 at that point, that's eating your time from moving yourself to that next floor as that elevator is going up, as you talk about it in your books. And again, folks, if you're looking to see what Lane's got going on, making sure you're checking out the wealthelevator.com and his podcast, the wealthelevator.com/podcast. It's all on his website. And John Monet, who's another railroader, he's actually here in the capital region. He's involved in the training of all the conductors and engineers. He talks about Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the best book he read when he was young, and a great show. I'm curious because I've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and hearing what you're talking about with that passive income and being able to use real estate to move to that next level. Was that Did that have any influence on you, or I mean, was it more you stumbled
Uh,
across like the idea of like, oh, I can start making some money this way?
yeah, it's funny. Like, I didn't read that book until I had like a handful of rental properties. And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't everybody do this stuff what this book is talking about,
But
right? I
it's a
mean,
genius book.
yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it's great mindset stuff, right?
Okay.
Um, Kiyosaki, he does a great job of saying very little in very many, many words. And some people need that, right?
I get it.
Like,
I understand what you
don't
mean.
get me wrong, people need that stuff. But like, a lot of engineers like myself, we just look at the numbers, right? And we just go. And I think that's what makes things hard, right? The older you get, like most of my clients are in their 40s and 50s. There's a lot of bad habits, right? Like it's like me and my golf swing, right? I got this like pull hook. It's like it's messy. It's horrible to unlearn that stuff. But and that's what I wanted to create, right? Like, I mean, it when I read that book a few years into doing this already, I was like, yeah, like what's it sounds great, makes all sense, but like, and this is where I started to interact with other accredited investors who also read that book. And the big angst is like, all right, it fills your head up with all this stuff, but then what the hell do you do? What
What's the
actionable
execution?
things, right?
What's the
Like,
execution side
and
to it?
that's what I'm big on focusing on. Like, what is like the first step? What's the action plan here, right? If you're under $500,000 net worth, buy some rental properties. If you're above that, we'll start to look at syndications and private placements. Certainly get around other purely passive accredited investors, and don't waste your time at the local real estate club with a bunch of house flippers or wholesalers who are trying to get rich quick.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I'm hearing that I really love about your approach is you're not, and look, nothing against the person who is the, hey, I'm making 50, 60,000 a year. You can get to this point and you can use this information for that. But I love the fact that you're focused on that person that you're over 100,000, 150,000 a year, and they've kind of created a cage for themselves and they don't know how to get out of it. And this is a process that they can use by going onto the website, by looking at your books, to get into a passive income, to kind of break that. Because we talked a little for a moment. You mentioned the 401k piece. I think that traps a lot of people in their job. I can't leave. My company does a 6% match for me. I can't leave this. I have to stay right here. Um, is that some of your experience with investors looking to do this? Like, how do you get their mindset to change? Like, hey, you can do this. This is how we're going to do it. How do you break that from them?
Well, I mean, it's different approaches, right? A lot of this stuff, I mean, if you check out my book and the podcast, you start to really understand the fundamentals of this stuff, right? I mean, the whole system is engineered to keep people in these garbage investments where Wall Street makes all the money and off these all hidden fees, right? Like, and that's kind of use that earlier example, like with just a simple passive rental property, I'm making like 30% every year. And why the heck would I want to put my money in something that goes up and down like a roller coaster for 7 to 8? Like, it makes no sense. But then, I think this is where like you are the five people you hang out with most, right? And this
Yeah.
was very transformative in 2015. I started to get around other accredited investors, many of which who own rental properties and were, selling it and transitioning to that second floor, third floor of the wealth elevator. And for what it's worth or whatever narrative you want to build, investing in alternative investments versus the traditional stuff is probably the better way to go, especially for the taxes point of view, right? I mean, most of my clients are able to cut their tax bill by 10, 20% for, first year. Now, if you're doing real estate professional status or aggressively getting other passive activity losses, Section 179 losses, they can drive their income way, way down almost to zero if they wanted to. And that's these are like the systems and the things that the wealthy do. And that was kind of where I was like, what the heck is going on here? Right. Like, I mean, a lot of these strategies that people were doing, and it's three main ones: the investing in alternative assets where you have to get off the beaten path and you have to interact with people and vet deals. No, it's not going to be served up in little Vanguard portfolio with this pretty pie chart for you, right? Because that's just, bastardized fee
It's bullshit.
laden
Yeah.
products. Yeah. Um, taxes, right? That, this goes well beyond 401ks or Roth IRAs. This is about driving your adjusted income down with your passive losses from things like real estate, and then do a little bit of privatized banking. If people have heard infinite banking, right? That's kind of the old school style of doing this. But when you combo these three strategies together, it's very powerful. But what I was so frustrated, not too long ago is like, man, this is stuff anybody can do, but it's very opposite of what my parents or what society is doing out there.
Yes.
But they're
Uh,
the saying like wealth whispers, money talks, but money is just loud there on Insta. I'm not on Instagram. I think that platform's dumb. TikTok. but like there's a lot of wealthy people that are quietly doing these things. And I was like, man, like the guys making 100, 200 grand a year, working hard at the railroad, those are the people that probably deserve it the most. And even the doctors out there, doctors, dentists, right? Like a lot of good providers to society, but there are also people that pay the most in taxes too, right? And and I was like, these people need it the most, right?
And John just popped up again. He said, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. He says, rental income is way better than 401k, which you were just saying. Passive income without fees, penalties, waiting until 59 and a half to collect, plus the railroad pension investment income. You can make as much as you want while you retire. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of like reminds me of this. I mean, I'll try not to get into these esoteric ideas, right? But essentially, like we're all taught to kind of put our money into a 401k or, some kind of index fund and build this pile. And at the end, when you're 59 and a half or 70 years old, whenever, you can finally eat, stop building that pile and you can kind of eat at that, right? But in reality, you want a cash flow stream from that pile of money.
Yes.
So that's exactly to John's point, right? Like you want to have streams of income, and in reality, it's the opposite. You need to be creating streams of income today so you can be eating off of it. But the beauty of when you have a job, you don't have to eat the streams of income. You can use those streams of income to create more cash flow babies or mini pensions in a way. So it's kind of opposite, right? But it's just another example of like, man, we've all talked the wrong stuff, right? Like they just want us to throw our money blindly in there because it takes freaking forever. And by the time we figure it all out and we have a lot of money in our 401k, and then we get slapped with this huge tax bill, whatever the heck it's going to be, probably going to be a lot higher in the future.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
like, oh, shoot, that was a bad idea. But, that's not the normal convention.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it wasn't until I owned my own company and did own my own business that I finally realized the only person that benefits from a 401k, and as you talked about moving your income to zero, and folks, that's actually a good thing if you own a business, move your income to zero. That means you're not showing that you made anything. You can claim different ways, but it wasn't until I owned my own business and I realized my investment guy was like, well, hey, you can invest $68,000 into a Roth and take it through the business. So it looks like you've lowered by $68,000 what your business does. So it's a write off for the business, but it's a write off for the business back to yourself. That's the only time that I saw that. And I went, oh, so that's good for me. Yeah. My money's going into something and I've already paid the taxes on it, vice, the IRA, the 401k where you're paying it on the backside. But back into the real estate side for a second. Um, what are some of the things that, as you're teaching folks about getting into this space and really understanding about investing in real estate, what are some of the first things that kind of come up where people are like, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm going to go invest in." Like, what are some of the things that you have to pause them want to go, "Nope, stop. This is a better process."
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental things is like you want to buy properties that make sense, like at cash flow. So a quick and dirty analysis is like this rent to value analysis where you take the monthly rental value divided by the purchase price. So, for example, like in California, you'd be lucky to find a place in the ghetto, and you don't want to buy rentals in the ghetto. But if you did, maybe it would cost 400 grand, and that thing would rent for $2,000 a month. So 2,000 divided by 400 grand is 0.5%. Then it's not going to work. You're going to need something that's a little bit higher, closer to 1% out there, right? So like what a lot of people start off with doing is buying little $100,000 houses that rent for $1,000. It's a little bit harder to find those these days, but not getting any easier. Better start this tomorrow. But that hits that 1% rent to value ratio there. So you're not going to get those types of ratios in primary markets like Seattle, California, Hawaii, New York. Not going to happen, guys. you're gonna have to go to like the ghetto of the like Baltimore to get
Hey,
that,
hey,
and you don't want to
that's where I'm
invest in
from.
places like that.
That's where I'm from. Come on, be nice, be kind.
And I'm just throwing some shade your way.
But you
But you know what it's all about,
Oh,
right? I mean,
100%. Look, my father and I used to own, properties in Baltimore City, and you unless you wanna deal with, Section 8 housing, that's really all you're gonna do down there. And it kind of brings up I'm curious about this. If someone is in, like you said, California, you're in New York, New Jersey even, these areas where it's difficult to find property that is that meets those numbers that you're talking about. What are some of the advice you give to folks as far as like, hey, you might have to go to Wyoming or you may have to go to, you know, somewhere out in the Midwest where that East Coast investor hasn't or West Coast investor hasn't invaded that space yet. What do you say to those folks, or is there a process for doing that?
yeah. Well, I try not to give advice. I try to just share experiences. That's kind of the way. Um, I mean, but this is me in 2012, 2015 in Seattle, right? High price area, really bad rent to value ratios. So I stopped buying in Seattle and I started to buy in Birmingham, Atlanta, and Indianapolis. Woohoo, right? Not the sexiest of places that may not appreciate and skyrocket like the other cooler parts of the country, but better numbers, right? And what I would suggest, it's a lot of it's just numbers based. You can go to my website, download the free analyzer. I think that's thewealthelevator.com/turnkey, and we have free e-courses for you guys. I mean, we mo- to be transparent, we do like high-end mastermind groups for accredited investors.
Oh, nice.
But where I started my podcast in 2016, I was kind of talking a lot about buying these little rental properties. So we have a lot of that curriculum, that we give away for free who people are on this journey, right? But like I said, like once you get to accredited investor status or $500,000 net worth or greater, I mean, it's time to kind of, let the pros take it over, right? And that's where we go pick up 100, 200, 300 unit apartment complexes, or we build it from scratch. And we still invest in these like, non-primary markets. Like we like, places like Arizona, Texas, Florida, Alabama, um, red states, right? Not to say anything politically, but when you're the landlord, you
It's a
you
little more benefit. They're a little
yeah,
more landlord friendly.
yeah. I don't want to offend you, Sean. You seem like a Democrat over there, but the court, it seems like the courts aren't as favorable to landlords. Yeah.
Well, if it helps, Jenny, I'm a libertarian. Is the way I run. I don't care what you do behind your closed doors and who you gotta love. Just don't play with my money and don't mess with my business. That's how I run.
Yeah, yeah. I would probably self-identify as a libertarian too. Um, but I also like I try and not talk politics because I
Yep,
think
I'm
it's
I'm
a bit
tracking.
of a waste of time. I'm more like, well, what are those two camps talking about? And how is it as I'm an investor, how can I skate to the puck? Right.
I like that. Now, John was curious. He wanted to know, where do you see real estate prices going? He sees a lot of housing prices in Florida dropping currently.
Well, we know like so it's two sides, right? Like I don't really do too much on the residential single family home side. I'm more on the commercial side, and in the
Okay.
commercial side, prices have dropped across the country 20 to 30%.
Wow.
It's carnage. But this is the time when like this is the ideal freaking like entry point for people. Not 2021, 2022. That was the top, right? As far as like residential, again, I can't really speak from experience on this one, but my take on that world is, most people are stuck in their good mortgages and they don't want to leave their houses. So you don't have a lot of volume and inventory. Therefore, your supply is low and your demand is the other side of that equation. The demand might be higher, might be lower, but because supply is so low, that's why prices have kind of stayed where they were. Generally, I'm pretty bullish on residential in the long term, but hey, I don't have skin in the game. I'm essentially just economist when you're asking me that kind of stuff. Like I'm more in the commercial world. But right now, yeah, like the 30% corrections due to the interest rates. So I mean, and I think we invest in multifamily workforce housing because the whole narrative of the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and folks like you and me are the shrinking middle class, that are going to likely become the lower middle class unless you start to invest in alternative investments. And therefore, and we like to invest in apartments, right? Things that rent
Right.
for $900, $1,400 rent, not the luxury stuff that the yuppies live in, but like, stable housing that in theory, in a recession, people need to fall back on more value housing.
Well, the other side to it is if you're talking about investing in 100-unit apartments or building 100-unit apartments, you can survive a little bit easier on empty units. I think that's the biggest thing when people start first getting into investing is, they're doing those first steps like you did, like John did. You know, it doesn't take much for one or two unrented units and you have four places to kind of be like, oh crap, I got to get these
Yeah.
rented. I got to get this income up. So I love the idea. I'd rather have that bigger, more. And out of curiosity, if somebody did want to invest in Rich, I'll get to you in a second. Folks, if you're finding me, again, if you're just tuning in, make sure you're liking and following and you're checking the wealthinvestor.com podcast out. But when people are investing, if somebody wanted to get into one of these and you're like, hey, you're in that right income level for us. We're getting ready to invest in a 100-unit apartment out in Arizona just for an arbitrary place. How many people are in that and how does that return piece work for an individual?
I mean, every deal is a bit different, right? I mean, like in a development deal where you're, creating something from scratch, you're obviously not going to have cash flow during the hold because you're freaking building the thing, right? For a
It's
year
gonna
or
show
two.
up, right?
Yeah. But, if you're applying normal bank leverage, you should be able to double, triple your money in that hold period, a few years. Um, if you're taking over an older asset like in the 1970s, 2000 build, I mean that used to be a lot of our bread and butter, like where we go in, we renovate units, we some would say put lipstick on a pig, right? But we would do like 5-10 grand of
Yeah.
rehab per unit, new flooring, new appliances, new paint job, new playground equipment. Try to bump the rents up couple $100, maybe 10%, 15%. In those, with normal, market cycles and like not a super hot economy, you should be able to double your money in something like that in, 4 or 5 years. It's not a get rich quick kind of flip, right? Like at least our plan is like we don't kick people out. I mean, obviously the bad characters that nobody wants living there are phased out, but as people's normal leases come up, we get in there, we renovate the stuff, and we get out, we get it leased up. And slowly, I mean, if everybody's probably lived in apartments, you guys know the flow, right? People are moving in and out all the time, a little bit more in the summer months, a little bit less in the winter months. But most of the units, call it 80% of them, churn in 2 to 3 years.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that much in that short of a period of time that they turn that way. So,
Yeah. Most of them are. I think, like, I mean, we have a lot of like legacy tenants where like, the grandma or the older person's living there for like 20 something years. So that it kind of skews averages, but your median tenant is in and out of there year or two.
but that shows, like you were saying earlier, the value of that property management company when you have that level of turnover, you need somebody that's constantly
Yeah.
on top of this. Is there anything that
Well, that's where that's what I found. Like when you're a landlord, like the residential property managers are horrible. They're absolutely horrible. They don't
what
know
do you
what they're
mean?
doing.
What do
I
you
mean, they're just real estate agents, essentially. But the commercial property managers, the ones that sit in the units, or, and lease people up, show people around, like they got a lot of systems. in place, and they're a lot more robust. Granted, their advantage is all the units are in front of them and they're there, right? Where like
Right.
a residential, landlord, it's like his second main thing he does, and he has like 50 units scattered
All
throughout the
over town,
neighborhood.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you the other
So
thing, I would have never thought that you've been mentioning an apartment unit as a commercial investment and not a residential investment. In my mind, I would have thought commercial is more of like, hey, I own a warehousing district, or I own, a strip mall, or something of that nature. I would have never put the apartment complex in that same vein as commercial. That's very interesting.
yeah, I mean, I'm probably butchering it a bit, but
No,
like
but it
single
makes
family
sense.
homes, duplexes, triplexes, quads. I mean, they're residential
Yeah.
assets. Think about it, right? Commercial assets are seen 5 units, 6 units, and above. Certainly 50 unit, certainly 200 units. But it's even though it is in the realm of residential, housing for
Right.
people. Commercial properties are also like self-storage facilities, mobile home parks, data warehouse centers, industrial warehouses, things like that.
I just saw an interesting one. Just a sidebar. You mentioned the data warehouse centers. I just saw an interesting thing on the news on Sunday. A data warehouse company that is partnered with the oil wells out in Wyoming. Have you seen this?
Oh, no.
Where they're using the uh, the blow off gas that they normally just spend out and burn off at these oil wells, using that gas to uh, create electricity to power data centers that are basically sitting on top of these oil wells.
Hmm.
So as trying to kind of create a green space for these high level of electrical. They started doing it
Yeah.
with Bitcoin mining centers, and then they realized we can just move this over into data centers.
Yeah. I mean, it's clever. They probably get a lot of good cost savings, but I think institutional investors would not like that because it's just too much risk, right? Like, you want to kind of, in a way, firewall your risks, right? So, like, if the business is predicated on the oil to power your facility, like, I don't know, it's just too
Yeah,
much,
that makes
right?
sense.
Like, it's like an example, like a lot of my clients are like dentists where they own their own practice, and they always, for some reason, they all want to like own their own building, right? Because I mean, logically, they're like, my biggest expense is my mortgage or my rent, right? So I'm gonna take that out. But it's like, no, like I mean, well, I don't wanna, coach here, but like in reality, like your their biggest they need to focus in their area expertise, which is being a dentist. Get out of the real estate game. You're just gonna buy some like lukewarm deal out there in terms of a medical office, right? Just focus on your area expertise and pay rent, right? Because you get flexibility, you can move around. But I think that's just kind of one of those things that I see a lot. Like, yeah, it makes a lot of stuff makes sense when you stack these things on top of them, but from business owners' point, I know you've heard this before, right? Like, what is the thing that you do well on, and double down on that, and
Keep
dentists
doing it.
should probably stay out of trying to be a weekend commercial property medical office operator.
Yeah, I'm not going out and flying planes. I know what I'm good at. I used to fix helicopters, but I'm not flying them. I get it.
Yeah, I fly Delta United. I ain't fly my own plane. I
Exactly.
I like food. I ain't cooking for myself, or I try not to, right?
Oh, I see. I can't help with
But for
laying.
some people love this buzzword of vertically integrated, right? Like,
I'm,
well, I guess like for us, like we could take property management in-house, make a lot of money off of that, but that's just not
but why?
we like we like the flexibility of, if a property management company is not performing, we fire them and get somebody else. There's a lot of other companies out there, right?
See, that
We
makes
don't want to
perfect
be
sense to me.
attached.
See, I love that mindset. That's what they do. That's what they're great at. That's what they have infrastructure for, and that's what they're built for. Let them do it. You're great at finding commercial properties, building, creating that level of wealth for somebody. Be great at what you're great at
Yeah.
instead of eating up your time with other stuff. But I want to talk about your website for half a second. You all right with that for a moment?
Well,
Because
one idea before we get off this,
yeah,
because
please.
it sets this up, because this is what a lot of this even translates to just people still working their day jobs, and the people who have rental properties and are doing the property management themselves to save a buck, right? You need to figure out what your highest and best use is. If you make over 100 grand, just focus on that. Try and get a promotion. I'm not a huge fan of jobs and promotions and stuff like that, but that might be your highest and best use than to be dicking around being a property manager and taking all the extra liability, right? So big investment companies, operators, and just small time salary Joe, like this, the idea is the same,
no, it
right?
makes perfect sense. Like if I'm in my job and I have a bachelor's degree and I know a master's is going to move me up and going to double my income. I mean, why wouldn't I do that and let somebody else manage my properties? I'm still going to make the
Yeah.
income off of it. Let them deal with that. That makes perfect sense.
Well, but people don't do that because they're cheap and they're like, I'll be damned if my property manager charges me $40 to change a light bulb. I'm screw that guy. I'm just gonna do it. Well, that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense from a large business perspective.
Um, you know what? This might be something. I mean, you can steal this out of my toolbox if it works for you. My best friend's husband said this to me one time. He said, I don't, he goes, he's a very capable person. He goes, I look at what I make an hour. And if going and having somebody else do that work is more cost effective than what I make an hour, you can go do it. Now, if it's something that makes sense that I can do it and it makes sense there, then I do it. We bought a new grill the other day. Bought a nice Traeger. I don't know if you ever seen a Traeger grill
Yeah, the
before.
smoker, yeah.
The smoker got everything. The guy at the Ace Hardware store, I said, how much is it to put the grill together? He said $25. I said, my wife was like, well, we could. No, we can't. I know what I make. I know what my value an hour is worth. It's way more than $25 an hour. He's more
Yeah.
than welcome to put that together for me.
Yeah.
And that's I've used that mindset. Unless I can find and if it's a skill I don't have, I'm not going to learn it. The value's not there for me to learn it. I look at what is my hourly value worth, and that's how I approach it.
Yeah. I still do stupid things like edit my own podcasts these days, but I derive some sick pleasure off of
But
it.
that's something you enjoy.
But
That's different. Well, just so you know, Lane, none of this will be edited. How you and I are going right now is exactly how the live will go out tomorrow.
yeah.
That's
Well, you are editing it. You're just not doing it.
yeah. I mean, in a way, yeah, we're editing as we're talking right
Yeah.
now. This is the edited version of our
Yeah.
conversation, and we are getting kind of close now to closing the bar. We're fairly close here, but I wanted to talk about your website for just a hot minute. I get people in all the time that have websites, and do you remember Firefly? You remember the old Firefly websites? Yeah, that's what they look like. You've got a great, well put together website that's absolutely great. And you were talking about earlier about the turnkey rental guy. If you look on his website, the wealthelevator.com, you click on guides, there's turnkey rental, there's syndication guide, infinite banking guide, ultimate tax guide, under resources, your books, podcasts, blogs, events, swag. I mean, what's the swag, bro? Like, is it like t-shirts? What are we doing here? I
Yeah,
haven't
t-shirts with like funny sayings on them.
oh, I just created it. I'm gonna dime out
Yeah.
my new t-shirt. I'm gonna try to get it out before 4th of July. It says they had a 13 colony lead and blew it, and then next to it has a red coat, a British red coat soldier. But it says they had a 13 colony lead and blew it.
Oh.
I love that one. But I mean, you got stuff all over testimonials. What is the now? I know you were talking about some stuff, but what's join the club?
Yeah, so a lot of like, I mean, where I found myself in 2015 as an accredited investor, it's just like I said, it wasn't scalable to keep buying rental number 12, 13, 14, 15. And again, a lot of what I learn is I meet other people that are a half step, step before me, and I just copy what they do. So what a lot of people will do, they'll just invest in bigger syndications. So like a 300 unit apartment complex, you might get 150 guys to throw in 50 grand, 100 grand, and you take it down in one deal. and it's siloed, right? So that deal does well, does bad, it's, diversified and separated off everything else, right? So what I discovered is these guys' portfolios would start to transition into dozens and dozens of these holdings. Like me personally, I think I must be in like 80 of these, 80 plus of these investments.
Wow.
And like that's, I mean, we operate deals, right? And I think, I don't know if we have time to get into this, but yeah, the hardest part of this is figuring out who's legit in this business, because
Yeah.
all these multifamily guys are a bunch of yo-yos that just like did a weekend boot camp. And it's really hard to find somebody who's actually done this for a while. Like we've done $2 billion of deals, 65, almost 70 projects now. We've been around the block. We've got lessons learned. But I think at the end of the day, like we are probably one of the most transparent groups out there. And it's a lot of this is through closed doors and private placements, right? So that's kind of why we have the community. And that's essentially, as a passive investor, probably the most important thing. I mean, if you guys want to, shoot us an email, we can get you connected for a lot of the syndication LP e-course content. But at some point, you're going to need the community of other passive investors to find out who's legit out there, because it's important. When I first started to invest in this stuff as a passive investor, like my first 15 deals I went into, a few of them were just with shysters or just fake it, make it operators. And I didn't know, I didn't have anybody, I didn't have any accredited investors around
Nobody
me.
backing you up, nobody really explaining to you like, "Hey, bro, this is not a good deal. See, John, this is what you need." Like, John's over here, he said, he has a "My property manager is well worth it. Let their phone ring with their problems." But that's what the other thing I think what Lane's saying is the other side to it, you get in with a group like his, you know, somebody else that's I imagine you've got lawyers, you've got everybody involved in this that are at that top tier level that are looking at these deals. It's more of, "Here's my money. I'll read what I need to read," but at the top level of this, there's people who are really understand these investments at a different level than the typical investor. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, I mean, the way I explain it, it's like institutional quality deals, right? Not little single family homes. Single family homes, there's so much competition. Anything under $5 million is so competitive. You never get a deal in those areas. But when you start to get into, 50 unit, 100 unit plus apartment complexes, just in the residential world, or data centers or self storage facilities, the world does open up and there's a lot less competition. But you got to pull a lot of cash together, right? And you have to invest with a lot of other investors alongside them. But to have a professional leading the helm, right? You're going to have the property manager, but just like I'll challenge you, John, like your property manager, he makes money when your property messes up. He don't care what you're making. He just wants to make you just happy enough you don't fire him or do it yourself. Whenever you have an eviction or something happens, they actually get paid more money. There is misalignment in that part. It's not a partnership. It's not, right? But in a syndication deal, you have the asset managers, the general partnership, who is aligned general partnership interests and skin in the game to that. They want to see the asset perform. They want to push your dollar so they can make a dollar, right? That's aligned interest. That's what a joint venture is, but without all the Wall Street bloat and fees that's associated.
No, you know what? I never thought about that, typically we think like, hey, you get enough properties, you need a property manager, but their value is not in your success, but it really is in your stumbling. Wouldn't say failure, but in your stumbling is really where they make their more money at.
They don't care if they're going to pump the rents up $50, $100. Yeah, maybe they get like $1 of that. They
Right.
don't care. They'd rather they if a property manager is smart, they just keep a decent tenant in there that's renting at 88% of what it should be, and they just go to sleep and they just work on 60 other clients' stuff.
That's Yeah, because I imagine with if you have a property manager for like a huge, staying with that 100 unit place, that property managing company has to have someone dedicated to that space. They're not running around looking at other locations. They're right there in that space and only in that space. That's interesting. And John says, how they titled with all the investors, and if one is not happy, how do they get out? What's the question, John?
I mean, I don't think this is for you, John. You seem a little bit more hands-on-y kind of guy, right? But how else are you going to get access to different geographic markets,
That's
right?
my thing.
And you want to get diversified on dozens and dozens of assets, right? So the idea is you have like a little $50,000, $100,000 position in all these deals. These deals, there's no exiting. It's illiquid. We're stuck. It's worse than a marriage. Marriage, you can get out of that stuff pretty easily compared to this stuff, but we're all stuck with each other. You know what? But hey, some people, it's not for everybody. Just like marriage isn't for
It's like marriage,
everybody.
still not for everybody. Keep
Yeah,
going. I
yeah.
mean, you're on
But
this one.
remember, like unlike marriage, well, I don't
If
know, I
I see
shouldn't say
something
this.
come out of nowhere and hit you in the
Yeah,
side of the head, I know that was your wife, that she heard you and said,
yeah.
keep going.
But it makes it worth it when the project you're going in is a value add strategy, right? I mean, this is what I caught on very early on. When I was buying those first 11 rental properties, it was a buy, hope, and pray model. I bought it at a good interest rate and price, and I just held on to it. But there was absolutely nothing I was doing to increase and force appreciate the value of it. Buy, hope, and pray, right? When you do force appreciation, when you're adding in playground equipment, reslurring the sidewalks, changing out carpet to bump rents up, that's force appreciation. And in this world, value comes to those who create value, right? I mean, yeah, you buy and hold an asset, you're providing utility to people, yada yada, but you're not creating any value in society, right? And wealth comes to those who create value. And unless you're involved in a large syndication where you have somebody actively at the helm guiding this thing, you're not going to be able to add value to these types of properties. Some people try to do it on the small scale, right? They call it buy, rent, repair, repeat. But again, single family home world is so difficult because it's so competitive, and you just get a bunch of yo-yo contractors in that world, right? When you're in the bigger scale, you're working with just bigger, more reliable contractors.
Yeah, they're actual big contracting firms. They're not the guy down the block that, yeah,
Yeah.
man, I got somebody who'll go over and paint on Tuesday. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, you're
But
dealing
it's not for everybody, right? If you need your 50 grand because you desperately need it, you shouldn't be investing in this stuff,
right.
right? We are accredited investors. We're supposed to have $1 million net worth and greater. You shouldn't need 50 grand. You should be able to pull it from somewhere else than your illiquid investment. Yeah.
All right. So John's question says, if he invested with you and died or needed to sell for some reason, how would someone get out of their interest pass the interest on to their family?
Well, I've never had anybody die on me yet. Had plenty of divorces, so plenty.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I imagine that comes
But
up
the
in
way
this
the way it works is, you gotta trust, you gotta will. You probably should have one of those things. When the deal exits, that money gets passed off to them or whoever you designate. Simple as that.
So when you say the deal exits, so the goal with these, if I'm understanding that, is you got the unit, you've created the value in it, almost like a PE private equity firm.
It's
But
essentially a PE. Like we are a
after a
PE,
couple of
right? In
years,
real estate.
gotcha. That makes perfect sense to me. So after a couple of years, you're selling it off. The goal is to sell it off, and then everybody gets their piece of the pie
Yeah.
based on their investment. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, we also invest in venture capital types of deals, but we like the hard assets such as real estate. But every deal is different timelines. Some are quicker, some take a little bit longer, but that's the whole idea, right? But I think what John needs to realize is, well, he's the landlord, he's the one directly on title. I don't care if he's using an LLC. That's a huge amount of liability. And accredited investors, if your net worth is over $1.5 million, you want to divest of all these dirty little rental properties because it's huge liability, right? And this is
Yeah.
where the passive investor, the LP position becomes critical because it's not so much about like making a lot of money. I mean, you do it force appreciation, but it's for a lot of people, and this is new to me, right? I was like, wow, these rich guys, they really care about like not getting sued, like
Yeah.
liability,
Yeah, they don't
right?
wanna lose
So
what they have.
yeah, when you got something, you try to protect it, right? And then, but that gets into other content we talk about, like irrevocable trust and all that type of stuff. But you know,
Looked into many of those. Now, we are gonna make a quick left turn before we get ready to close everything up here. Nate asked a question all the way towards the beginning. Nate always asks some very unique question. Lane, you're gonna have to put your thinking cap on here for a minute.
oh my,
This might have been in the first 11. This might have been just in some of the stuff you guys have put together, but he wants to know, have you ever come across a place that was haunted?
uh, no, no. I mean, usually apartments aren't haunted because nobody cares. It's always those crazy single family homes that are always
The ghosts
unique.
don't wanna stick around in the apartments. They're like,
You know,
even they don't wanna stay there?
that's why I like commercial properties and assets and apartments because it's like it's cookie cutter. There's nothing special about it. It's just a freaking box of square
Yeah.
feet, right? It's take all like the emotions out of it. It's just the same thing again and again and again. And ghosts don't like that, right?
Yeah, they're not into that.
Yeah, but plenty, like plenty of crazy things, right? Like, I mean, I don't even know how many tenants we have. Like I guess we'd have like 10,000, 15,000 people that live in these things, right? Like so many like hangings and like
Oh, no
like
shit.
just like like that type of stuff happens all the time. I mean, I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
woulda never. I mean, it makes sense, but I woulda never put that together. Look, folks,
yeah,
I know
but I
Lane
guess none of those people care. None of
and
those
the
ghosts
ghosts
come back. I don't know.
they were like, "We're not even the ghosts wanted to
You know,
stick around in these places." I
I
get
don't
it.
know. I mean, your ghosts per hanging ratio is like way more in single family homes.
Ghost
I'm
per
guessing.
hanging ratio.
Yeah.
I I need to see a chart on
Well,
that.
I just say that because I just want to bring awareness to it, right? Because for some reasons, Men's Health Month is the same. It gets overshadowed by the Pride Month, right? For some strange
Right.
reason. So I just want to put some shine on that whole awareness out
Yeah,
there.
June gets packed full of all kinds of things. Well, keep in mind Juneteenth is coming up and that'll be overshadowed, and I'm with you on all that. So, Lane's gotta get ready to go, folks. If you're interested in what he's got going on, again, thewealthelevator.com. You wanna hear his podcast. How often does your podcast go out, Lane?
Just once a week.
So once a week, pre-recorded, live? What is it?
We edit it pretty heavily. No ahs, no ums, real fast. Life's short. We don't have time for fluff on ours.
Gotcha. This is very fluffy, just like my
But it's
beard.
fun. Your stuff is fun. Yeah. I
It's
mean,
just different.
they want to have
So
a conversation at the bar.
that's it. That was the goal here. So make sure you're going checking out what Lane's got going on with the wealthelevator.com. You're checking his podcast out. Look, if you feel like you're ready to invest, as soon as you get on the front page of his website, in the upper right hand corner, it says invest with us. Check out what he's got going on. He's got testimonials on there. He seems like a pretty approachable guy to me, that if you wanted to find out more or talk to somebody that's been involved in the investings, he would probably point you in the right direction of those folks. If you like, if you found us through Lane or Lane through us, again, make sure you're giving us that like, follow, share, all those important things. It may sound cliche like a kid's YouTube video, but listen to me. It matters to us. It's how we all get found. It's how we all get bigger. It's how all this happens. Now, look, if you're liking this, make sure you're joining us next week. We got John Harper coming on. He's a corporate executive with a Fortune 200 company. He's working with different teams in marketing. We're talking about building different business units. We're getting more into that side of building your business, whether you're an entrepreneur or, I know how I started as an entrepreneur. That's how we're going to do this. Now, Lane, don't log off on me directly after this. I just need to talk to you for half a moment here. Now, as we do on every episode, Lane, if you haven't noticed it, the guest always gets the final word. So, what is our final word for tonight, Lane?
Invest in real estates. Ideally, we're doing force appreciation. But yeah, just get educated. Check out my podcasts. Because it unlocks a lot of these additional tax strategies. And there's a different way out there to build wealth than what our parents taught us and what's being done by our peers.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.